The judge leaned back in his chair, sneering at the young girl standing before him. "You expect me to believe you know anything about the law?" he mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What are you, a child playing dress-up in grown-up clothes? You look like you belong in middle school, not in a courtroom." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, some of the spectators chuckling at the judge's words, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Lena stood silently, her heart pounding. At just 16 years old, she had been through a lot in her life, but she had never felt so humiliated. This was supposed to be her moment, the moment where her skills as a self-taught attorney could shine. But here she was, facing the most important case of her life, with everyone around her doubting her. The judge's words stung, and she knew that this was no ordinary courtroom. This was a place where biases were often more powerful than the law itself. The case she was working on was personal, too personal. It was about her best friend, Ava, who had been wrongly accused of stealing from a local store. Ava was a hard-working teen who had always kept her nose clean. But on this particular day, she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Security footage showed someone who looked like Ava, but Lena knew in her heart that it wasn't her friend. The real thief was still out there, and Lena was determined to prove it. The judge's mockery only fueled Lena's fire. She had studied law for years, devouring books and online courses, teaching herself everything she could about criminal defense. But all of that knowledge seemed worthless in the face of such blatant prejudice. Despite her youth, Lena was sharp, probably sharper than most of the lawyers who walked into this courtroom. But would anyone believe her? "I'm ready to proceed," Lena said, her voice steady despite the fire rising within her. The judge looked at her with disdain, clearly unimpressed. "Proceed? You're out of your league, little girl," the judge sneered. "But go ahead, try. Let's see how you embarrass yourself." Lena didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and walked to the front of the courtroom. She opened her case file, scanned the papers for a brief moment, and then looked directly at the judge. "I'm not here to play games," she said, her voice rising with confidence. "Ava didn't do this, and I can prove it." The judge scoffed. "Prove it? To me, you're just a kid trying to talk big." Lena knew she had to act fast before the judge dismissed her entirely. She turned to the courtroom, gathering the attention of the spectators and the jury. Her eyes locked onto Ava's family, sitting nervously in the front row, their hope and trust resting on Lena's shoulders. "The footage from the store's security cameras might show a girl who looks like Ava, but I can prove it wasn't her," Lena continued, her voice calm but full of purpose. "I have a witness who can testify that they saw the real thief." The judge's eyes narrowed. "And who might this witness be?" Lena didn't hesitate. "Ava's younger brother, Jack?" There was an audible gasp in the courtroom. Jack had been with Ava the day of the alleged theft, but he hadn't been able to testify earlier because of his age. He was only 10, and many people had thought he wouldn't be able to offer much as a witness. But Lena knew differently. Jack had a sharp eye for detail, and he'd seen the thief's face clearly. He just had to testify, and the truth would come out. The judge looked skeptical, but Lena's determination didn't waver. "You'll see," she said. "When Jack takes the stand, you'll know I'm telling the truth." "Fine," the judge muttered, clearly irritated. "Bring in this supposed witness of yours. But I'm warning you, if this is a stunt, I'll make sure you regret it." Lena nodded, stepping aside as the bailiff went to get Jack. She could feel the tension in the room, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Was she really going to pull this off? Could a 10-year-old boy really turn the tide in a courtroom filled with adults who couldn't seem to take her seriously? Jack walked into the courtroom, holding tightly onto his mother's hand. His eyes were wide, his face a mixture of fear and excitement. He was small for his age, but Lena knew he was brave. He had always been brave, especially when it came to protecting his sister. The judge raised an eyebrow as Jack took the stand. "So, this is your big witness, huh?" he asked, clearly not impressed. Lena stood tall, her heart racing. "Yes, Your Honor. Jack is the key to proving Ava's innocence." The room fell silent as Jack was sworn in. Lena could feel the weight of every eye on him, the skepticism in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "Jack," Lena began, her voice steady, "can you tell the court what you saw that day at the store?" Jack looked up at her, his small face full of determination. He took a deep breath before answering. "I saw the person who did it," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "It wasn't my sister. It was someone else. I saw them, and I know it wasn't Ava." A ripple of surprise swept through the room. People were starting to listen. "Can you describe what the thief looked like?" Lena asked gently. Jack nodded. "They had a red jacket and a baseball cap. And they were tall, taller than Ava." "She's not that tall." "I know it wasn't her." Lena's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She turned to the judge, who was staring at Jack with an expression of disbelief. "Your Honor," Lena said, "the person who did this wasn't Ava. Jack saw the thief clearly, and now we have the proof. We just need to find the red jacket and the baseball cap, and we'll have our culprit." The judge didn't respond right away. He stared at Jack for a long moment, as though trying to decide whether to believe him. Then, with a scoff, he spoke. Well, the judge said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose you've convinced me. A child's testimony is the magic solution to all our problems, isn't it?" The courtroom was stunned into silence. Was he mocking Jack? Was he going to disregard the truth simply because a child had spoken up? And then, just when Lena thought things couldn't get worse, the judge slammed his gavel down and declared, "This court will not be manipulated by a child's fantasies." Case dismissed. Lena froze. Her heart dropped to her stomach. Was it over? Was everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, going to be thrown away because the judge didn't want to listen? The sound of the gavel echoed in the room, and Lena's world seemed to crumble before her eyes. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice from the back of the courtroom called out. "Hold on a second," the voice shouted. "You can't just dismiss this case like that." Lena turned around in shock, wondering who would dare challenge the judge in such a bold way. But what she saw next left her speechless. Standing at the back of the courtroom was... Lena's heart skipped a beat as she saw the person standing at the back of the courtroom. It was a woman, a tall, well-dressed woman with piercing eyes and a confident posture. She had the air of someone who was used to being in charge. The woman stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her presence commanding attention. She was holding a briefcase, and the way she walked made it clear that she wasn't just any bystander. She was someone who had authority in the world of law. "Your Honor," the woman said, her voice firm and clear, "I must respectfully ask you to reconsider your decision." The judge, who had been looking as though he was ready to wrap up the case, turned to face her. "And who might you be?" he asked, clearly irritated but with a hint of curiosity in his tone. The woman smiled slightly, but her eyes remained serious. "My name is Attorney Rachel Thomas. I'm here to represent the interests of justice. And from what I've heard, justice has not yet been served in this case." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. A real attorney had just walked in, and by the look of her, she was no novice. But why had she come? Lena watched in awe, unsure of what would happen next. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Attorney Thomas, is it? I didn't call for your presence. This is a simple case. A child's testimony does not hold the weight of actual evidence. We're done here." Lena's heart raced. Who was this woman? How did she know about the case? And what did she mean by the interests of justice? Attorney Thomas turned to Lena, her gaze softening just slightly. "Lena, I know who you are," she said. "You've been studying law, haven't you? I've been following your progress. You're smarter than you know. And you're doing the right thing by standing up for your friend." Lena blinked in surprise. "You know me?" "Yes," Attorney Thomas nodded. "I've seen your work. You may be young, but your heart and mind are in the right place. In this case, well, it's not going to end like this." The judge, clearly growing impatient, leaned forward. "Enough of this nonsense. The case is dismissed. Let's move on." But before he could hit the gavel, Attorney Thomas stepped forward, slamming her briefcase onto the table with a sharp thud. "I said no. This case is not over. Not while there's a chance for truth. If you dismiss this case, Your Honor, you will regret it. I will take this to the State Bar, and you will answer for it." "I'm sure you don't want that." The judge's face flushed with anger, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had clearly underestimated this woman. Your Honor, Attorney Thomas continued, I don't care if I'm interrupting your day, but I'm not going to let an innocent girl be convicted just because someone doesn't want to listen. Now, we have evidence. We have a witness. And I'll make sure this case is seen through to the end. Lena stared, speechless. This was all so sudden. Who was this woman? And why was she standing up for her? Had she been sent by someone? Was she trying to steal the spotlight? The judge looked like he was ready to erupt. You cannot threaten me, Thomas. You think you can walk in here and make demands? I will not be swayed by anyone, especially not some outsider with no understanding of the law. But Attorney Thomas wasn't done. You're right, Judge. I'm an outsider, but I understand the law better than most. And the law says that we cannot convict someone based on assumptions, based on prejudice, or based on age. We need facts, and I'm here to make sure we get them. The room was quiet as the judge took a moment to consider her words. His grip tightened on the gavel, and Lena held her breath, waiting for him to react. Would he give in? Would he change his mind? Finally, the judge spoke, his voice cold and final. Fine, we'll hear more evidence. But I warn you, Attorney Thomas, do not waste my time. Attorney Thomas nodded. I won't, Your Honor. With that, the judge called for a recess, ordering everyone to step out while the lawyers prepared their next steps. Lena couldn't believe what had just happened. She had been given a second chance. But how? Who was this woman? As the courtroom began to empty, Lena turned to Attorney Thomas. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity and disbelief. You don't even know me. Attorney Thomas smiled gently. I know enough. And I know what it's like to be underestimated. I was once a teenager, just like you, trying to find my place in a world that didn't take me seriously. But I found my voice, and I won't let anyone stop you from finding yours. You're on the right path, Lena. Keep fighting for your friend. And for what's right. Lena didn't know what to say. She had heard stories about people who fought for justice, but she had never imagined that someone would fight for her. A woman, a stranger, had just walked into the courtroom and changed everything. Thank you, Lena whispered, her heart swelling with gratitude. Attorney Thomas nodded. You don't need to thank me yet. We still have work to do. But I believe in you. The two women shared a moment of understanding, their bond forged in the fire of justice. Lena didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Attorney Thomas by her side, she could face whatever came next. She wasn't alone anymore. But as they prepared to re-enter the courtroom, something unexpected happened. A figure emerged from the crowd of onlookers, someone Lena didn't recognize. The figure's eyes locked onto Lena's, and for a moment, she felt a chill run down her spine. The figure stepped closer, their expression unreadable. And just as Lena turned to face them, the figure spoke, their voice low and intense. You think you've won, don't you? This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Lena's stomach dropped. Who was this person? And what did they want? Everything inside her screamed that this was just the beginning of something much bigger and far more dangerous. Lena's heart hammered in her chest as the figure approached. There was something unsettling about them, an aura of authority that made Lena feel small and vulnerable. She instinctively took a step back, her hand tightening around the folder in her grip. The figure didn't say anything else at first, just stared at Lena with piercing eyes. The crowd had started to filter out of the courtroom, but this person's presence was enough to make everyone freeze. Even Attorney Thomas, who had been calm and composed moments before, seemed to sense the tension and shifted her stance, ready for whatever was about to unfold. Lena opened her mouth to speak, but found that her words failed her. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Who was this person? Why had they approached her now? Finally, the figure spoke, their voice cold and calculating. You're playing a dangerous game, Lena. Lena's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shakier than she intended. She didn't know why, but she felt like she had just walked into the lion's den. The figure's lips curled into a slight smirk. You think you've won, don't you? You think that bringing in a child as a witness and having some attorney swoop in is going to change the outcome of this case. But let me tell you something. There are forces at play that you don't understand. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about this person's words, the way they spoke, that sent warning bells ringing in her mind. "Who are you?" she asked, though she already had a sinking feeling she wasn't going to like the answer. The figure straightened, their eyes never leaving Lena's. "Let's just say I'm someone who knows the truth about people like you. And I'm not here to make friends." Attorney Thomas stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Leave her alone. This is a court of law. If you have something to say, you can say it in front of the judge." The figure turned their gaze toward Attorney Thomas, and for a brief moment, Lena saw a flicker of recognition in their eyes. It was almost as if they were assessing her, measuring her worth, her credibility. "You think I'm afraid of the law?" The figure sneered. "The law isn't as powerful as you think. People like you, like Lena, are just pawns in a much bigger game." Lena's confusion deepened. What was this person talking about? What game? She glanced at Attorney Thomas, who was standing her ground, but the older woman's expression was hard to read. There was a sense of unease in her posture, a hint that she wasn't entirely sure who this person was either. "You'll regret this," the figure said before turning abruptly, their cloak-like jackets sweeping across the floor as they headed for the exit. "You'll all regret this." Lena stood there, still trying to process everything that had just happened. The room felt colder, darker, despite the bright lights above them. She felt a knot form in her stomach, a gnawing sense that something much larger was at play, something far more dangerous than a simple court case. "Who was that?" Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper as she turned to Attorney Thomas. Attorney Thomas gave her a hard look, her face momentarily hardening. "I don't know," she said, her voice low and careful, "but I've got a feeling they know exactly who you are. And that's not a good sign." Lena swallowed hard. She had never felt so exposed in her life. Who was out there watching her? What did they want? And why had they singled her out like that? Her mind raced with questions, none of which had clear answers. "Don't let this distract you," Attorney Thomas said, her voice firm, snapping Lena out of her spiral of thoughts. "You have to stay focused. You're doing the right thing. That person, whoever they are, they're trying to shake you. Don't let them." Lena nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. "I won't let them," she said, more to herself than to Attorney Thomas. The two of them returned to the courtroom, where the judge had called for a brief recess. But as they entered, Lena felt the weight of the situation settle back onto her shoulders. She was standing at the edge of something big, something that was much bigger than she had ever anticipated. The case, Ava's future, her own future. It all felt like it was teetering on the edge of a knife. As they sat down and prepared for the judge to return, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. There were eyes on her, in the corners of the room, in the shadows. Every time she turned her head, it felt like someone was just out of view. She tried to push the feeling away. She had a job to do. She had to focus on winning this case for Ava. But the unease in her chest only grew. The judge returned to the bench, his expression stern. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, clearly not in the mood to deal with the disruption that had just occurred. Lena sat up straighter, trying to push away the lingering fear. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. She still had a chance to prove Ava's innocence. She just needed to find the missing pieces of the puzzle, pieces that would lead her to the real thief. She turned to Attorney Thomas, who was already preparing her next move. "We're not done yet," Lena whispered to her, her voice filled with resolve. Attorney Thomas gave her a small nod. "I know, and we won't give up. Not until Ava is free." But just as Lena was about to turn back to the judge, the doors to the courtroom burst open again. This time, it wasn't the mysterious figure from before, but someone Lena knew all too well. Ava. Ava rushed into the courtroom, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Lena, you need to stop. You're in danger." Lena froze. The room seemed to blur around her as she looked at her best friend, her heart hammering in her chest. "Ava, what's going on? What do you mean I'm in danger?" Ava took a deep breath, looking over her shoulder as though she feared someone was watching. "You don't understand. They're watching you. They're watching both of us. You have to be careful. If you keep pushing, things are going to get much worse." Lena's mind raced. What was Ava talking about? Who was watching them? And why hadn't she said anything sooner? Just as she was about to ask more questions, the figure from earlier reappeared at the back of the room, their eyes locked on Lena's. A cold shiver ran down her spine. It was clear now, this wasn't just about Ava anymore. This was about her, too. And just when Lena thought things couldn't get any more complicated, the figure stepped forward once more, and their words sent a chill through the entire courtroom. You've made a huge mistake, Lena, and now you're going to regret it. Lena's blood ran cold. The words hung in the air, echoing in her mind, replaying over and over. You're going to regret it. She didn't know why, but something about the way the figure said it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. It wasn't just an empty threat. It felt real. Too real. Ava, who had rushed in with panic written all over her face, stepped closer to Lena. Lena, listen to me. You have to stop. Now. You don't know who you're dealing with. This isn't just a case about stolen goods. This is bigger. Much bigger. Lena shook her head, trying to keep her focus. She had to keep going. She couldn't just back down now. Ava, I can't stop. I promised you I'd get you out of this. I promised you I'd prove you're innocent. But Ava grabbed her by the shoulders, her voice desperate. I know you promised, but this is dangerous. There are people involved in this case who have way too much power, and if you keep pushing, they won't stop until you're ruined. You don't realize how deep this goes. Lena's mind was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about this case, everything she had fought for, was being shattered. She had thought she was fighting for justice, fighting for Ava's freedom, but now she was beginning to realize that the people she was up against weren't just criminals. They were powerful, influential, and willing to go to any lengths to protect their own interests. The figure who had threatened them stood in the back of the courtroom, watching them intently, their expression unreadable. They didn't look like they were going to leave. In fact, they seemed to be waiting for something. Something Lena couldn't quite put her finger on. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. You can't win this, Lena, the figure said again, their voice cutting through the silence. This isn't a game you can play. You think you've got a witness, a child, no less, and a lawyer you barely know, but that's not enough. Not when you're dealing with people like us. Lena tried to steady her breathing, her heart pounding in her chest. Who are you? Why are you doing this? The figure didn't answer. Instead, they turned and began walking toward the exit of the courtroom. I'll give you one last piece of advice, Lena. Stop now. Turn away from this case before it's too late. Because once it's over, there's no going back. Lena's eyes flicked to Attorney Thomas, who had been standing silently, observing the scene with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The woman's usual composure was now replaced by a wariness that Lena hadn't seen before. She was clearly unsettled. I've seen people like them before. Attorney Thomas muttered under her breath, her tone grim. They don't play fair. And they have resources. You can't outsmart them on your own. But we have to try, Lena said, her voice low but determined. I can't just give up. Ava's innocent. This is the right thing to do. Attorney Thomas didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer now. I get it, Lena, but sometimes doing the right thing means stepping away when the risk is too high. There's more at play here than you know, and the deeper you go, the harder it's going to be to get out. Lena stood still, absorbing her words. For the first time, doubt began to creep into her mind. Was she really prepared for the consequences of what she was doing? She had always believed that if she kept fighting, the truth would eventually come out. But what if this time it wasn't that simple? What if the truth was buried too deep for anyone to find? Before Lena could respond, there was a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The doors flew open, and in walked two men in dark suits. They didn't look like ordinary lawyers. They had an air of authority about them, like they had just stepped off the pages of a corporate playbook. They walked straight toward the judge, ignoring everyone else in the room. Your Honor, one of the men said in a smooth, professional tone, we have a request to make regarding this case. The judge, who had been watching the proceedings with growing impatience, raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? The man didn't waste any time. We represent the interests of the store that's at the center of this case. We request that the charges against the defendant be dropped immediately and that this case be dismissed, effective immediately. Lena's heart sank. This wasn't supposed to be happening. The case couldn't just be dismissed. Ava couldn't go free just because these men asked for it. There was evidence. There was a witness. There was a chance to prove Ava's innocence. But the judge, without hesitation, looked down at the request, then back at Lena. "I have been presented with compelling evidence," he said, his voice stern. "And based on this new request, I see no reason to continue. The case is hereby dismissed." Lena felt her world spin out of control. She couldn't believe it. Everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, was slipping away. The judge had just sided with the powerful, influential men who had walked in without so much as a second thought. Ava's fate was sealed, and Lena had no idea what to do next. The courtroom fell silent as the gavel came down. The decision was final. Ava was no longer a defendant. She was free, but it didn't feel like a victory. As the judge rose from his chair and the courtroom began to empty, Lena stood frozen. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. She had failed. But just as she was about to turn and walk out, a voice called out from the back of the room. It was the same voice, the same cold, calculating voice that had threatened her earlier. "You're not done yet, Lena," the figure said, stepping out from the shadows. "You think you've won?" This was only the beginning. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't over. The game had just started, and she was now a player in a world much darker than she had ever imagined. Ava, who had been standing beside her, turned to Lena with a worried expression. "Lena, we have to go. It's not safe here." Lena nodded, her mind racing. She knew Ava was right, but the question still hung in the air. What was going to happen next? And as they turned to leave, Lena could hear the figure's final words echoing behind them. "You've made a mistake, Lena, and now you'll pay the price." The words haunted Lena's every step as she and Ava made their way out of the courthouse. The figure's warning echoed in her mind, louder than the clicking of her heels on the marble floor. "You've made a mistake, Lena, and now you'll pay the price." Lena had been in countless stressful situations, but this felt different, darker. She didn't know who she was fighting anymore, or even why they were after her, but she knew one thing. The stakes had just been raised, and she was in way over her head. Outside, the bright sunlight hit them like a wave, but the warmth did nothing to ease the tension in Lena's chest. Ava, her face pale with fear, clung to Lena's side as they walked toward the parking lot. "I told you," Ava whispered. "I told you they were dangerous." Lena turned to her, shaking her head. "This isn't over. We're not just going to walk away from this. We have to figure out who those people are, who's really behind all of this." Ava hesitated, glancing over her shoulder nervously. "Lena, I don't think we can fight them alone. You saw the way the judge just dismissed everything. These people are powerful, and they've got connections everywhere." "I don't care," Lena said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty clawing at her insides. "Ava, you didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't have been accused in the first place. I can't just let it go. There's something bigger going on here. We need to find out what, and we need to fight back." But Ava's fear was palpable. What if we're in over our heads? What if it's already too late? Lena stopped walking, turning to face her friend. "Then we fight until it's not too late," she said, her eyes burning with determination. "We don't have a choice." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ava looked at Lena as if seeing her for the first time, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. "I believe in you, Lena," she said quietly. I don't know if I can keep going with this. I don't know if I'm strong enough for whatever comes next." Lena placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, trying to steady both of them. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "You've already survived worse. And we're in this together. You're not alone." Just then, a black car pulled up beside them. A tall man in a suit stepped out of the vehicle. His features were sharp, his expression unreadable, and there was something about his presence that made Lena's stomach drop. This wasn't just some random stranger. It was someone who had been sent. "Are you Lena?" "Lena Alawu?" he asked, his voice smooth but cold, like steel. Lena instinctively took a step back, her hand still on Ava's shoulder. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She was already too aware that she was being watched, being pulled deeper into a game she didn't fully understand. The man's lips curled into a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. My name is Daniel Grayson. I've been sent to make sure you understand the situation you're in. Lena felt her breath catch. Sent by whom? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Ava, then back at Lena. It's not important who sent me, he said. What matters is what you're going to do about it. Lena frowned. What do you want from us? Nothing for now, Daniel replied, his voice calm, almost too calm. But I'll be keeping an eye on you. If you keep digging, if you keep fighting, things will get much worse. You'll start losing more than you ever thought possible. Lena clenched her fists, her mind racing. This was it, the warning she had been expecting, the first real indication that she had crossed some invisible line. But something in her refused to back down. She had come too far. I'm not afraid of you, Lena said, her voice unwavering. Daniel chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill through her. You should be. You don't realize how much power these people have. They're everywhere, Lena, watching, waiting. You'll find yourself on the wrong side if you keep this up. With that, Daniel gave a short nod and climbed back into the car, the door closing softly behind him. The engine revved to life, and without another word, the car pulled away, disappearing down the street. Lena stood there, her thoughts racing. She had been warned again, but it wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The people behind this case weren't playing fair. They were willing to go to any lengths to protect their secrets. And now she was in the middle of it. Ava stared at Lena, her face pale. Lena, we can't do this. We can't win against them. They're too powerful. Lena took a deep breath, looking up at the sky as if the answers might be written there. I can't stop. Not now. They're going to regret underestimating me. Ava stepped closer, her voice filled with worry. Lena, please. This isn't a game anymore. People's lives are on the line. If you keep pushing, you're going to lose everything. Lena turned to face her best friend, her expression firm. I won't let them win, Ava. I promised you I'd get you out of this. And I'm going to keep that promise. But deep inside, Lena wasn't so sure. The warnings were getting louder, the stakes higher. And with each step she took, the weight of her decision grew heavier. Was she really prepared for the consequences of what she was about to do? Later that evening, Lena sat at her desk, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. She had never felt so alone, even though Ava was right there, supporting her. Her phone buzzed with a message, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was from an unknown number. I know what you're trying to do. Stop while you still can. You have no idea what you're up against. If you continue, there will be consequences. Serious consequences. It's your choice. Lena stared at the message for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, and once again, that gnawing feeling returned. Something wasn't right. She was in way too deep, but the fire in her chest, the fire to fight for Ava, for justice, burned stronger than ever. She had a choice to make. Would she back down, or would she risk everything to uncover the truth? Just then, there was a knock on the door. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she slowly got up, walking toward the door. Who could it be at this hour? Her hand hesitated on the doorknob. When she opened it, standing there was a familiar face, someone she never expected to see. Hi, Lena, said the person standing at her doorstep. We need to talk. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Standing at her doorstep was Rachel Thomas, the lawyer who had stepped in during the trial earlier. Her sudden appearance, especially at this hour, sent a wave of uncertainty through Lena's mind. What was this woman doing here? And why now? Rachel's expression was serious, her eyes scanning the room as if making sure no one else was around. She didn't seem like she was here for small talk. There was an urgency in her demeanor that Lena couldn't ignore. Can I come in? Rachel asked, her voice low but steady. Lena hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She didn't know if she should trust Rachel. The last time they had spoken, Rachel had seemed like an ally, but with everything that had happened since, Lena wasn't sure who was on her side anymore. But something about Rachel's presence gave Lena a sense of stability. She opened the door wider, stepping aside. Okay, Lena said quietly, but I don't know if you'll be able to help. I'm in too deep, and I don't know who I can trust anymore. Rachel nodded, stepping into the room. She glanced around quickly, ensuring no one was following her, before closing the door behind her. I understand, but I think you need to hear what I have to say, Lena. What's happening now is much bigger than you realize. And it's not just about Ava anymore. It's about you too. Lena's stomach twisted. What do you mean? What's going on? Rachel took a seat at the small kitchen table, and Lena sat across from her, suddenly feeling like a target. There are people, powerful people, who don't want this case to go forward, she began, her voice low and serious. The store? That's just the surface. The truth is, this case is connected to something much darker, something more dangerous. And right now, you've become a part of it. Lena felt the weight of her words sink in, her heart pounding faster. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? I'm just trying to help Ava. She didn't do it. She's innocent. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes locking with Lena's. I know that, and I believe you. But the forces behind this case, behind everything that's happening, they've been watching you for a long time. They know who you are. They know what you're capable of. And they're not going to let you get away with exposing the truth. Lena's throat tightened. She was terrified now. They've been watching me? Why didn't you tell me this before? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. If you knew how dangerous this was, why help me at all? Why get involved? Rachel paused, her expression softening slightly. I wanted to help you because I saw something in you, Lena. Something I didn't have when I was your age. A sense of justice, a desire to right wrongs, no matter the cost. I didn't want you to go down the same path I did, getting pulled into a system that's rigged against you. Lena felt a pang of guilt. Rachel had warned her to back off, and she hadn't listened. Instead, she had pushed forward, determined to prove Ava's innocence and expose the truth. But now, Lena realized, she had no idea what she was really up against. Why did you leave your law firm? Lena asked. It was something that had always bothered her. Rachel had been well established in her career, but one day, she had simply walked away. Rachel's gaze dropped for a moment, as though she were deciding how much to reveal. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I was forced to. There are people in high places who control everything. The law, the media, even the police. And they didn't like the way I was investigating certain things. So, they made sure I lost everything. My job, my reputation, even my license. Lena blinked, her eyes widening in shock. But why? What were you investigating? Rachel took a deep breath, leaning back in her chair. There are powerful organizations that pull the strings behind the scenes, Lena. They control what happens in this city, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. When I started uncovering their ties to illegal activities, everything from embezzlement to organized crime, they decided I was a threat, and I paid the price. Lena sat frozen, absorbing her words. So you're saying the people behind this case, this whole mess, are connected to those organizations? Rachel nodded grimly. Exactly. And now that you're involved, they've noticed you too. They see you as a threat. You're getting too close to the truth, and they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to silence you. To silence Ava. To silence anyone who stands in their way. Lena's mind was racing. She had thought she was just fighting for Ava's innocence, just trying to clear her name. But now she realized the stakes were much higher. Her fight wasn't just against a store that had wrongly accused her friend. It was against a shadowy, dangerous network that controlled everything. We need to stop. Ava's voice cracked as she appeared in the doorway. Lena, we can't keep doing this. We don't have the power, and they'll hurt us. You heard what that man said, and now Rachel is telling you the truth. It's too dangerous. Lena turned to face her best friend, who was clearly distraught. Ava's face was pale, her hands trembling as she wrung them together. I can't lose you, Lena. Please, just walk away from this. We can go somewhere else. Start fresh. But not like this. Not with everything that's at stake. Lena's eyes softened as she looked at Ava, but her heart was torn. She didn't want to walk away. She couldn't. Not after everything they had been through. Not when the truth was so close. I can't just turn my back on this, Ava, Lena said softly. You didn't deserve any of this. You didn't do anything wrong. And if I walk away now, I'll be letting them win. I can't live with that. Not after everything we've fought for. Ava's eyes filled with tears. Lena, please. They'll hurt you. They'll hurt both of us. Lena stood up, walking over to Ava. She pulled her friend into a tight hug, trying to give her comfort she wasn't sure she could provide. I won't let them hurt us. I promise. But even as she spoke the words, Lena wasn't sure she could keep that promise. The weight of everything was pressing down on her. The people she was up against weren't ordinary criminals. They were powerful, far-reaching, and willing to destroy anyone who got in their way. And just as Lena was about to speak, to reassure Ava, her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. A message appeared on the screen. You're still making a mistake. Stop now, or else. Lena stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. There was no more room for doubt. She had made her choice. She wasn't backing down now, but as she set her phone down, a sinking feeling settled in her gut. She had no idea what was coming next, but whatever it was going to change everything. The air around Lena grew heavier with every passing minute. The message on her phone burned in her mind, its final words echoing like a drumbeat. Or else. What could that possibly mean? What were they threatening her with this time? Ava was still clinging to her, her face pale with fear. Lena, please, she whispered, almost begging. Don't do this. You don't know who you're up against. They'll do worse than just threaten you. They'll hurt you. They'll do whatever it takes to make sure you stop. Lena gently pushed Ava away, her heart aching with the knowledge of what her friend was going through. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let the shadows win. If she backed down, it would mean giving up on everything she had worked for, everything she believed in. I know, Lena whispered, her voice strained, but I can't stop. I won't let them control me. Not now. Ava's eyes welled up with tears, but she nodded slowly, though clearly torn. Just be careful, okay? I don't know what they can do, but they've made it clear they won't stop. Lena turned her focus back to Rachel, who had been watching the exchange silently. The older woman's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. Rachel, Lena said, you told me these people have connections everywhere. Who are they? What exactly am I up against? Rachel stood up and walked to the window, looking out as if she were weighing her next words carefully. They're not just a crime syndicate or some underground group. This is bigger than that. These are people who operate at the highest levels. Corporate elites, corrupt politicians, and even law enforcement. Their influence stretches all the way to the top. They're untouchable. Lena's breath caught in her throat. You mean the law is working for them? The police? The judges? Rachel nodded grimly. Yes, that's why they can make things disappear. Why they can dismiss cases like yours with a snap of a finger. They control everything. You might think you're fighting for justice, but this is a game where the rules are already rigged. Lena swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation sink deeper into her chest. How could she fight against an invisible enemy with so much power? How could she expose the truth when the truth was buried so deeply beneath layers of corruption and influence? You're not alone in this, Rachel continued, turning to face Lena. I've been fighting them for years, ever since they destroyed my career. But it's not easy. Every time I try to get close to the truth, they pull me back. And now they've found you. They know what you're capable of, and they won't stop until they've neutralized the threat. Lena's mind was spinning. How had she gone from helping a friend, trying to clear her name, to getting tangled in something so vast, so dangerous? Was there even a way out anymore? But then, something inside her clicked. She had no choice but to continue. She couldn't just give up. Rachel saw the fire returning to Lena's eyes and nodded. Good. But listen to me carefully. If you're going to keep going, you need to be smart. They're watching you, and they've already started making moves. This is no longer about winning a case. It's about survival. We need to be strategic. Lena met Rachel's gaze, determination burning in her chest. What do we do next? Rachel exhaled slowly. We gather evidence. We find out who's behind all this. And then, we take them down. But we do it quietly, and we do it carefully. If you're not careful, they'll make sure you disappear, just like they did to me. No one will believe you. No one will stand up for you. You'll be left with nothing." Ava looked over at Lena, her face full of concern. "But how do we even begin? If they have all this power, where do we even start?" Rachel smiled faintly, a glimmer of something like hope in her eyes. "We start by finding the cracks. Every empire has its weaknesses, its secrets. If we dig deep enough, we can find something that will bring them down. The truth always finds a way out, if you're willing to risk everything to uncover it." Lena's mind raced as she processed Rachel's words. This wasn't just about winning a case anymore. It was about exposing an entire network of corruption. She would have to outsmart them, beat them at their own game. "I'm ready," Lena said, the weight of the decision heavy in her voice. "I can't just back down. Not when I know the truth is out there. I won't let them get away with it." Rachel nodded, a look of approval crossing her face. "Good. But you need to be prepared for what comes next. They'll start making their moves soon, and it won't be subtle. Keep your eyes open, and don't trust anyone who comes your way, especially not the people who seem like they're helping." Lena clenched her fists, her mind made up. There was no turning back now. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As Rachel prepared to leave, she turned to Lena one last time. "I'll be in touch. But remember, Lena, you're not just fighting for Ava anymore. You're fighting for something much bigger than that. You're fighting for justice itself." The door clicked shut behind Rachel, and Lena was left standing in the room with her thoughts swirling. The weight of everything she had just learned was suffocating. She was no longer just a young girl trying to clear her best friend's name. She was now a player in a much larger game, one where the rules didn't exist and the consequences of losing were dire. Ava walked over to her, her face a mixture of fear and admiration. "You really are going through with this, aren't you?" Lena met her friend's gaze and nodded slowly. "I have no choice. I have to keep going. For you, for me, for everyone they've hurt." Ava sighed, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and worry. "Just promise me one thing, Lena. Promise me you'll be careful. I can't lose you too." Lena pulled Ava into a tight hug, her heart heavy with the weight of the promise she had just made. "I'll be careful," she whispered, though deep down, she wasn't sure if she could be. What she was about to face was beyond anything she had ever imagined. But she was ready. The fight for justice was about to begin in earnest, and Lena wasn't backing down. As they pulled apart, Lena felt her phone buzz again. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked at the screen. Another message from the same unknown number. "We warned you, Lena. It's too late now. You've made a dangerous enemy. And we don't lose." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. It was official now. There was no turning back. She was in the fight of her life, and the stakes had never been higher. Lena took a deep breath and turned to face the world ahead of her. She had no idea what would come next, but one thing was certain. She wasn't backing down. The following days felt like a blur. Every time Lena tried to settle into a rhythm, something seemed to throw her off course. More threatening messages, strange cars parked outside her house, mysterious figures watching her every move. It felt as though she was being suffocated by the weight of it all, but Lena refused to give in. She had made her choice. There was no going back. Ava had grown quieter with each passing day, her anxiety building as Lena continued to press forward. It was clear that her friend was scared. Scared for Lena's safety, scared for both of them. But Lena couldn't stop. Not now. She was standing on the precipice of something monumental, and no matter how much she feared the unknown, she knew she couldn't back down. The fight for justice wasn't just about Ava anymore. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how dangerous the cost. Lena had begun piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered. Everything from Rachel's warnings to the strange events she'd witnessed. All of it pointed to one undeniable fact. She was in the middle of something much bigger than she had ever realized. But there was one thing Lena knew for sure. Someone was behind this. Someone powerful. Someone who would stop at nothing to make sure the truth stayed buried. And now it was her mission to find them and take them down. It was early in the morning when Lena received an unexpected call. The unknown number. She stared at the screen, hesitation creeping in, but then she pressed the answer button. "Hello?" Your time is running out, Lena, came the chilling voice on the other end. It was familiar, the same voice she had heard in the courthouse, the same voice that had threatened her countless times. You think you're safe, but you're not. You've made your move, but now it's our turn. Lena's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't back down. What do you want from me? She demanded, her voice trembling only slightly. The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. It's too late to ask questions, Lena. You're already in too deep. You should have stopped while you still could. Now, we'll make sure you regret every move you've made. The line went dead. Lena stood there, holding the phone in her hand, her fingers gripping it tightly. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind howling, the ground beneath her unstable. Every instinct in her body screamed for her to retreat, to run, to stop. But she couldn't. The threats, the pressure, everything, none of it mattered. If she stopped now, everything she had worked for would be in vain. Ava's name would remain tarnished, the truth would stay hidden, and these powerful people would walk away scot-free. Lena's resolve hardened. She would not be a pawn in their game. She would not let fear dictate her life. She had already come too far to turn back. Later that day, Rachel called. I've got something, she said. Meet me at the usual spot. It's important. Lena nodded, though she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in her stomach. Every move they made now was dangerous. But she didn't hesitate. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed Rachel, needed her guidance more than ever. The usual spot was a small, inconspicuous cafe on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just a quiet place where Rachel had often met with old contacts. When Lena arrived, she found Rachel sitting at a corner table, her face tense. I've been digging deeper, Rachel said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I've found something that could finally break this whole thing wide open. But it's going to be risky. Lena leaned in, her curiosity piqued. What is it? What have you found? Rachel pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the table. Lena picked it up, unfolded it, and immediately felt her stomach drop. It was a list of names, important names. People with power, people who controlled industries, politicians, law enforcement figures. But there was one name that stood out above the rest, at the very top of the list. Lena's hands began to shake as she read the name aloud. Daniel Grayson. Rachel nodded gravely. He's the key. He's the one orchestrating all of this. He's not just some pawn in the game. He's the one pulling the strings. He's been behind everything. The wrongful accusations, the threats, even the judge's decision. And now, he's aware of what you're doing. Lena's heart raced. Daniel Grayson. The man who had first approached her in the courthouse. The man who had threatened her and then disappeared. She had thought he was just another part of the puzzle, but now it became clear. He was the mastermind. Rachel's voice brought her back to the present. We need to get to him before he gets to us. The more we dig, the more dangerous it becomes. But this list is our start. We can trace these names, find out who's connected to whom, and then expose them. But Lena, we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we could be walking straight into a trap. Lena looked at the list again. The faces of the people she had seen in court, the people who controlled so much, flashed in her mind. She had no idea how deep this went. I'm ready, Lena said, her voice filled with a quiet, dangerous resolve. If Grayson's behind all of this, we need to take him down. We need to show everyone who he really is. Rachel gave her a pointed look. We will. But first, we need to get this information to the right people. I know someone who can help us. Someone with connections in the right places. But it's risky. You'll have to trust me on this. Lena nodded without hesitation. She had learned to trust Rachel, even when the stakes were high, even when the danger loomed large. Rachel had always been one step ahead, and now Lena needed to follow her lead. As they stood to leave, Lena felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. This wasn't just about clearing Ava's name anymore. It wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about surviving. But as they walked toward the door, Lena's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. You think you can bring him down? You're nothing but a small pawn in a game you don't understand. Keep going. You'll regret it when you realize who you're really up against. The message sent a shiver down her spine. But this time, Lena didn't flinch. She was done being afraid. They were coming for her, but she wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not ever. The war had just begun. The intensity of the situation grew with each passing day. Lena could feel the walls closing in on her as she, Rachel, and even Ava began to see the weight of the battle they were in. The constant threats, the shadows that seemed to follow them wherever they went, it was impossible to ignore. But one thing became crystal clear. Lena couldn't back down now. There was no turning back. Rachel had been invaluable in the days since they started digging deeper into Daniel Grayson and the people connected to him. The list they had found, filled with powerful names, had become their blueprint for understanding just how far-reaching this web of corruption went. But even as Lena absorbed the information, a heavy dread hung over her. The people they were up against weren't just criminals. They were untouchable. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Lena was dealing with an empire built on secrets, lies, and manipulation. But there was a part of her that couldn't let go of the hope that, somehow, they could take it all down. She had to believe that. Rachel had arranged a meeting with an old contact, someone who could help them take this information to the authorities, someone with the clout to make a real difference. The meeting was set for midnight in a quiet, off-the-grid location. Lena was nervous. Everything about this felt wrong, but it was the only way forward. Ava had stayed behind, her fear growing by the day. She couldn't bear to see Lena walking straight into the danger, but she understood why Lena couldn't stop. "Just promise me you'll be careful," Ava had said earlier, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose you, Lena." "I promise," Lena had whispered, even though she wasn't sure if she could keep that promise. The night of the meeting, Lena found herself pacing outside the small, run-down warehouse where Rachel had said the meeting would take place. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow felt like it was hiding something, someone, watching her. It was as though the city itself was conspiring against her. As she stood there, trying to steady her nerves, she saw a car pull up to the entrance of the warehouse. A tall man stepped out, wearing a dark coat and a hat that obscured his face. Lena's heart raced. Was this the contact Rachel had mentioned? Or was this another trap? The man moved toward her, and Lena instinctively took a step back, her hand reaching for the small gun Rachel had insisted she carry for protection. The man stopped just a few feet away, his face still hidden in the shadow of his hat. "You must be Lena," he said, his voice calm but laced with something cold. "I'm here to help, but I need to know if you're serious about this." Lena didn't lower the gun. She knew better than to trust anyone right now. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. The man chuckled softly, the sound like ice scraping against metal. "My name's not important. What matters is that I have information. I have the tools you need to bring Grayson down. But I need to know if you're prepared to follow through." Lena lowered the gun slightly but kept it in her hand, just in case. "What do you mean? What tools? What do you know about Daniel Grayson?" The man took a step closer, his eyes finally visible in the dim light. They were cold, calculating. "I know everything about Grayson. I've been tracking him for years. I know who he's working with, where he's hiding his secrets, and how he's been using the system to stay untouchable. But if you want to bring him down, you need to be ready to risk everything. He's dangerous, Lena. More dangerous than you can imagine." Lena's mind raced. This was the moment. She could feel it in her bones. The man was offering them the chance to take down Grayson, finally. But the price of failure was too high. The price of success? She didn't know if she could pay it. "I'm ready," Lena said, her voice firm. "I've come this far. I can't stop now. We'll do whatever it takes." The man nodded slowly, and for the first time, a glimmer of approval flickered in his eyes. "Good. You've got the right mindset. Follow me." He turned and began walking toward the entrance of the warehouse, and Lena followed, her mind buzzing with questions. Who was this man? What was he really offering? Could he really help them? Inside the warehouse, the dim lighting cast long shadows against the walls. The man led her to a small back room where a large, metal table was surrounded by monitors and papers. It looked like a command center, a place where plans were made and deals were struck. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to the chair at the table. Lena sat down, her heart still racing. She had no idea what to expect, but she wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not when they were so close to taking Grayson down. The man walked over to the table and began spreading out a series of photos and documents. "This is everything I've gathered on Grayson," he said. "His connections, his operations, his weaknesses. I've been watching him for a long time, and I've learned a lot. This is the evidence you need to expose him." Lena stared at the photos. There were images of Grayson with several high-ranking officials, police officers, judges, and even a few politicians. Everything Lena had suspected was true. Grayson wasn't just involved in petty corruption. He was entrenched in a network that spanned the city, the state, and beyond. "You've got what you need," the man said, his voice low. "But here's the catch. You can't take this information to just anyone. If you expose it recklessly, you'll be silenced. You'll disappear without a trace, and this will all be swept under the rug. You need to go after him strategically. Take him down from the inside." Lena nodded, absorbing everything he was saying. She knew the stakes had just gotten even higher. This wasn't going to be a simple court case or a quick battle. This was war. "How do I do it?" she asked. The man smiled grimly. "You need to get close to his inner circle. You need to find out who's working for him, who's protecting him. And when you've identified them, that's when you strike. But you have to be careful. One wrong move and it's over." Lena swallowed hard, but there was no fear in her eyes. There was only determination. She wasn't going to let Grayson and his network get away with this. Not now. Not ever. "I'm ready," Lena said again, her voice unwavering. "We'll take them down." The man nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then it begins. But remember, Lena, once you start, there's no turning back. You'll be in this for good. You'll be a target for the rest of your life." Lena stood, looking at the documents one last time. "I've already made my choice," she said, her voice cold with resolve. "Let's do this." As the man turned and began gathering the documents, Lena's mind raced with the enormity of what they were about to undertake. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. This was a fight for survival, and Lena wasn't about to lose. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension and strategy. Every move Lena made was calculated. Every word spoken was carefully chosen. Rachel had been invaluable in helping her navigate the intricacies of the information they had gathered. But despite their progress, there was an unshakable weight in Lena's chest. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the situation became. Grayson's network was vast. The more they uncovered, the more people they realized were involved in his operation. Police officers, judges, influential politicians, all of them puppets in his game. Lena had known it was bad, but seeing it laid out in front of her made her sick. This wasn't just a case of corporate fraud or political corruption. It was a full-blown criminal syndicate operating under the guise of legitimacy. Rachel had arranged for Lena to meet a few trusted allies, former colleagues who had been burned by Grayson's influence and who were now working to bring him down from the inside. One of them, a former detective named Lucas, had connections within Grayson's inner circle and could help them pinpoint his weakest link. It was late one evening when Lena received a call from Lucas, telling her to meet him at a diner on the outskirts of town. He had information that could change everything. The diner was almost empty when Lena arrived. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the tables. Lucas was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. He looked up as Lena walked in, his face tense but determined. "Sit," he said, motioning to the booth across from him. Lena slid into the seat, her mind racing. "What do you have for me, Lucas?" Lucas glanced around, then leaned in closer. "I've been tracking Grayson's movements. I have a name that could bring the whole thing down. Someone close to him. Someone who knows everything." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" Lucas hesitated before answering. "It's Claire Donovan. She's been Grayson's right hand for years. She handles his logistics, his dirty work. If you can get to her, if you can get her to talk, it'll all come crashing down." Lena took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of the revelation. Claire Donovan was the key. But how could they get close to her? And would she be willing to talk? Or would she silence them before they even had a chance? "How do we get to her?" Lena asked, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her. Lucas leaned back, his eyes narrowing in thought. That's the tricky part. Donovan's loyal to Grayson. She's smart, and she's been running his operations for too long. But she's also been getting nervous. There are cracks in her loyalty, Lena. She knows things are starting to unravel. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. Lena nodded, her mind already racing with a plan. Where is she? How do I find her? Lucas smiled faintly, as if impressed by Lena's determination. She frequents a bar on the edge of the city. It's quiet, low profile. Not many people know about it, and it's the perfect place for her to lay low when she doesn't want to be seen. I can get you in, but be careful. Donovan doesn't trust anyone. If you approach her the wrong way, she'll vanish without a trace. Lena felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. One step closer to taking down Grayson. But she knew it wasn't going to be easy. This was a game of high stakes, and one wrong move could be the end of it all. I can handle it, Lena said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. I'll find a way to get to her. I have to. Lucas's expression grew more serious. Remember, Lena, if Donovan's involved, Grayson's entire operation is at risk. She knows too much. If you can get her to talk, you can take down the whole empire. But you have to be smart about it. She's not a person you can just convince with words. She'll test you. You have to outsmart her. Lena didn't answer immediately. She was already thinking ahead, mapping out her approach. She couldn't just rush in blindly. She needed to approach this like a chess game. Every move had to be deliberate, calculated. I'll need your help to get me close to her, Lena said, locking eyes with Lucas. We need to make sure she doesn't see me coming. Lucas nodded, standing up. I'll set it up. But once you're in, you're on your own. Lena stood as well, feeling the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders. This was the most dangerous thing she had ever done, and yet, she felt more determined than ever. The truth was finally within her reach, and nothing, not even the threats or the danger, was going to stop her. Later that night, Lena stood outside the bar Lucas had mentioned. It was a small, unassuming building on the outskirts of town, nestled between a rundown gas station and an abandoned storefront. The kind of place no one would look twice at. And that's exactly what made it perfect for someone like Claire Donovan. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air against her skin. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, undercover, low-key, but with a sharpness that would allow her to move with purpose if the situation demanded it. The bar itself was dimly lit, with only a few patrons scattered around, nursing their drinks in silence. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and stale beer. At the far end of the room, near the back door, Lena spotted a woman sitting alone at a table, her posture rigid, her gaze scanning the room with careful attention. It was Claire Donovan. Lena's pulse quickened. She was here. The key to everything. Lena hesitated for a moment, weighing her options. This was it. There was no going back. She had to approach Donovan carefully, make the right first impression. One wrong move and this whole thing could fall apart. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she walked across the room, every eye seemed to be on her. She kept her focus on Donovan, who hadn't looked up from her drink. It was now or never. Lena reached the table and stopped just a few feet away. She kept her voice steady, her face calm, hiding the storm of nerves inside. Claire Donovan, Lena said, her tone cool and controlled. We need to talk. Donovan's eyes flicked up to meet hers, and Lena saw the briefest flicker of surprise before the woman's face hardened. Who are you? Donovan asked, her voice low and guarded. Lena didn't flinch. She had to stay in control. Someone who knows what you've been involved in. Someone who can help you. If you're willing to listen. For a moment, the room was silent. Lena held her breath, watching Donovan's every move, trying to read her expression. The woman's gaze was calculating, like she was deciding whether Lena was a threat or an opportunity. And then, without a word, Donovan took a sip of her drink, the corner of her lips curling into a slight smirk. Help me, huh? That's a big claim. Lena stood her ground. I'm not here to waste your time. Grayson's empire is crumbling. You don't have to be part of it anymore. Help me take him down, and I'll make sure you're not left holding the bag. Donovan studied Lena for a long moment, her eyes narrowing, as if she were searching for any sign of weakness. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming on the table. "You think I'm just going to turn on Grayson like that?" Donovan asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Lena didn't hesitate. "I think you already know what he's capable of. And I think you know it's only a matter of time before he turns on you." For the first time, Donovan seemed to hesitate, her eyes flickering with something close to doubt. But before Lena could say another word, Donovan's expression shifted back to one of cold calculation. "Let's see if you're right," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "But don't get any ideas. You're not in charge here. I am." Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The game had just begun, and she was ready for whatever came next. The tension in the air between Lena and Claire Donovan was palpable. Every second felt like a delicate balance between trust and manipulation. Lena had expected Donovan to be a tough nut to crack, but she hadn't anticipated how quickly the woman would turn the tables on her. Claire Donovan leaned back in her chair, her icy demeanor never wavering. The look she gave Lena was both calculating and dismissive, as if she were weighing the pros and cons of the conversation in her mind. Lena could feel every ounce of her confidence being tested, but she refused to let it show. "I've been watching you," Claire said, her voice quiet but intense. "You're not as innocent as you think. You think you're playing in the big leagues now, but you have no idea who you're really dealing with. Grayson doesn't let anyone get too close, and when he's ready to cut you loose, he does it without hesitation." Lena swallowed hard but maintained her composure. "I know who Grayson is. I know what he's capable of. And that's exactly why I'm here, because I'm not going to let him get away with it anymore. You don't have to stay loyal to him. There's another way." Claire's expression faltered for just a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. It was brief, barely noticeable, but Lena caught it. Claire was starting to crack. She just needed the right push. "You think I'm just going to walk away?" Claire scoffed, shaking her head. "Grayson doesn't take betrayal lightly, and he's already been watching you. I know you think you're clever, but you're not the only one with eyes on this situation." Lena took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had to find a way to get Claire to trust her, even if just for a moment. This was the break she needed. This was the moment that could change everything. "I'm not asking you to walk away," Lena said, leaning forward just enough to make her presence known without sounding desperate. "I'm asking you to be smart. Grayson's empire is collapsing. You don't want to be caught in the wreckage when it falls. I'm offering you a way out, Claire. A way to survive this and come out on top." Claire's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a tight, unreadable smile. "You really think you can outsmart Grayson? You think you can bring him down with your little truth and some documents? It's not that simple. There are forces involved here that you can't even begin to comprehend." Lena stood her ground, not backing down an inch. "I don't need to outsmart him. I just need to expose the truth. And you, Claire, you're the key to making that happen. You know how he operates. You know where he's vulnerable. You know what he's hiding. Help me, and we can bring him down together." Claire studied Lena for a long moment, her eyes cold and calculating. For a second, Lena thought she might walk away, brush her off like everyone else had. But then, Claire did something Lena hadn't expected. She smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile Lena had hoped for. It wasn't friendly or trusting. It was a smile that sent a chill down her spine. "I think you're underestimating just how far Grayson's reach goes," Claire said softly, almost teasingly. "I'm not afraid of him, Lena. I've been working with him for years. I know how to protect myself. You think that coming here, sitting in front of me, is some grand move? It's not. It's just you playing into his game." Lena's stomach twisted. What was Claire really saying? Was this a test? Or was she trying to manipulate Lena into making a mistake? "You're right about one thing," Claire continued, her voice turning darker. "Grayson's empire is crumbling. But it's not because of you. It's because of people like me. People who know how to play the game. And if you think for a second that I'll help you tear it all down, you're gravely mistaken. I've been part of this world too long. I've survived by playing it, not by trying to change it." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She'd miscalculated. She'd underestimated Claire. This wasn't about loyalty to Grayson. It was about survival, and Claire had chosen her side. But there was still hope. There had to be. Lena leaned in even closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. And what about when Grayson decides you're no longer useful? What happens when he discards you like everyone else? You've seen what he does to people who cross him. He doesn't care about loyalty. He cares about control. He'll throw you away just like he's done to everyone else. There was a brief flicker of something in Claire's eyes, something that looked like fear, something Lena hadn't seen before. For a split second, she thought she might be getting through to her. Claire's eyes shifted away from Lena's, and her fingers drummed lightly on the table. You don't know anything about me, Lena. You don't know how many times I've been betrayed, how many times I've had to fight for my place. I've done things that would make your skin crawl, just to stay ahead. If you think I'm going to put my trust in you, you're wrong. Lena's pulse quickened, but she kept her tone steady. Then why are you still here? Why haven't you left yet? You're still listening to me. You're still considering what I have to offer. Claire's gaze snapped back to Lena's, and there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew. She knew exactly what Lena was doing, and she wasn't entirely immune to the idea of it. You really think you can play this game, don't you? Claire said with a small, cynical laugh. I'll tell you what, I'll let you keep thinking that. But don't mistake this for trust. You're playing with fire, and when you get burned, don't come crying to me. Lena felt a surge of frustration, but she didn't show it. She couldn't. Not now. I'm not afraid of fire, Claire. But you should be. Because Grayson won't hesitate to burn anyone who gets in his way. He's done it before, and he'll do it again. And if you want to survive, if you want to get out of this alive, you'll need to make a choice. For the first time, Claire's expression wavered. Lena could see the doubt in her eyes, the uncertainty. Claire was torn. But was it enough? Was Lena close enough to making her crack? I'm not making promises, Claire finally said, her voice low. But I'll give you a chance. I'll talk to you. But you need to understand something. You're walking into something much bigger than you think. And if you think for a second that you're going to win this without making enemies, you're wrong. Lena stood up slowly, her heart racing. She had done it. She had gotten through to Claire, even if just a little. I don't need to win, Claire. I just need the truth. And once you see it, once you understand what Grayson has done, you'll see why this is worth fighting for. Claire stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. We'll see. But don't think for a second this is over. It's just getting started. As Lena walked away from the table, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far deeper, far more dangerous than she could have imagined. But there was no turning back now. She had Claire Donovan on her side, and that meant she was one step closer to bringing Grayson down. But the real battle was just beginning. The days following Lena's tense meeting with Claire Donovan felt like a strange limbo. Lena knew she had made progress, however small, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead was still heavy on her shoulders. Claire's involvement was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, she was an invaluable source of inside information. On the other, she was a dangerous ally, someone who had survived by playing the game of manipulation and deceit. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that Claire was testing her, probing her intentions, and waiting for her to slip up. But Lena had no intention of giving her that satisfaction. She would play the game, just like Claire had, and she would win. Rachel had been busy behind the scenes, trying to gather more information from her old contacts, but the pressure was mounting. Grayson's network was vast, and they were watching every move Lena made. She had received more threats, more warnings, and yet, she had not flinched. She was determined. And now, with Claire's reluctant agreement to help, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle was within reach. But she couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. She had to stay ahead of them, stay ahead of Grayson's people. That night, Lena sat in her apartment, reviewing the documents and photographs that Rachel had gathered. She was going over the connections again, trying to piece together Grayson's criminal activities and the people who were working with him. But something nagged at the back of her mind, an unsettling feeling that she couldn't shake. It was then that her phone buzzed. The message was from Claire. I have a meeting. You want in? It's tomorrow night. Be there. Lena's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for. A meeting. But what kind of meeting? Who would be there? And more importantly, was this a trap? She didn't hesitate for long. She had come this far. She wasn't going to back down now. She sent a quick reply. I'll be there. The next evening, Lena donned her usual attire. A simple black dress, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She knew she needed to blend in, not stand out. This wasn't a social gathering. This was business. The kind of business that could change everything. The meeting spot was at an upscale hotel, a place that seemed out of place given the clandestine nature of the gathering. But then again, Grayson's people were masters of hiding in plain sight. The room was dark, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and cigar smoke. It was a private dining area, separated from the main restaurant, with heavy curtains drawn and a dim chandelier casting shadows over the long table. As Lena entered, she saw Claire sitting at the far end of the table, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room with a predator's precision. She didn't look surprised to see Lena. If anything, she looked pleased. "Glad you could make it," Claire said, her voice low. "Take a seat." Lena moved cautiously toward the table, noticing the other people present. There were 4 others, all men in suits, all of them looking like they had stepped out of a high-stakes corporate boardroom. But Lena knew better. These weren't ordinary businessmen. These were players in Grayson's world. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the sharpness of their attention. She sat down across from Claire, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room. The silence was thick with unspoken tension. Lena could sense it. They were sizing her up. They were testing her. Claire broke the silence. "This is Lena," she said, gesturing toward Lena with a small nod. "She's here because I've heard enough to know she might be useful. But don't get any ideas, Lena. I don't trust you." "Not yet." Lena met Claire's gaze without hesitation. "You don't have to trust me. But I'm here because I have information. Information that will help all of you." The men around the table exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The leader of the group, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward. "And what exactly do you have to offer?" he asked, his voice sharp. Lena took a deep breath. "I know everything about Grayson's operation. Where he's hiding his assets, who's involved, who's been silencing people. You can't trust him. He's already turned on you, or he will soon." There was a murmur among the group. The man who had spoken before, the one with the salt and pepper hair, looked at her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "You think Grayson will turn on us? You're mistaken. He's the one who holds all the cards." Lena didn't flinch. "Grayson's losing control. His empire is crumbling. People are starting to talk, and once they do, it's only a matter of time before everything unravels. The only question is, do you want to be the ones caught in the fallout? Or do you want to make sure you're on the right side when it all comes down?" The man with salt and pepper hair leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. Claire, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you don't understand what you're asking. We've all made deals, and those deals come with consequences. If Grayson falls, it's not just his empire that comes down. It's ours too." Lena kept her eyes steady on her audience, her voice unwavering. "That's why you need to act now. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to escape the wreckage. I'm offering you a way out, a way to take control of your own future." For a moment, the room was silent. The men exchanged glances, clearly weighing Lena's words. And then, to Lena's surprise, the man with salt and pepper hair leaned forward, a small smirk playing on his lips. "All right," he said, his voice laced with intrigue. "You've got our attention, but I don't trust you. Not yet. Let's see if you can prove you're more than just talk." Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't show any sign of it. "I don't expect you to trust me," she said, "but I've got what you need. I know where Grayson is hiding. I know how to bring him down." The man nodded slowly. "We'll see. But remember, this isn't a game. If you're in for good." Lena's eyes flicked to Claire, who gave her a small, calculating smile. It was clear that this was a test Lena was determined to pass. As the meeting continued, Lena kept her focus on the conversation. She knew she was walking a fine line. One wrong word, one wrong move, and it could all come crashing down. But she wasn't going to let that happen. Not when she was so close to the truth. And as the meeting drew to a close, the man with salt and pepper hair stood, offering Lena a nod. "We'll be in touch. Don't make us regret this." Lena stood as well, her mind racing. She had made it through the meeting. She had survived. But she knew that this was only the beginning. Grayson's empire was crumbling, and she was about to take the first step in bringing it all down. She just had to stay one step ahead. The game had only just begun, and Lena wasn't going to lose. The next few days were a blur of activity and strategy. Lena could feel the pressure building with every passing moment. She had made it through the meeting, and now she had a dangerous game to play. Grayson's empire was fragile, but it wasn't going to crumble easily. She needed to stay ahead, to outwit them all before they realized what was happening. Claire had kept her distance after the meeting, but there was a strange sense of respect between them now, albeit unspoken. She had given Lena a chance to prove herself, and Lena had delivered. But the real work had just begun. Now she needed to gather everything she could on Grayson. Everything that would tie him to the countless crimes, the corruption, the people who had suffered in his wake. She had to be methodical, careful. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. Rachel had been working tirelessly with her contacts, gathering more intel, reaching out to people who had been burned by Grayson's influence. They were close, so close, but Lena knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. Every piece of evidence, every name on the list, every contact she made brought her one step closer to the truth, and she wouldn't stop until she had it all. The days blurred into one another, the hours consumed by meetings, phone calls, and the quiet hum of determination. Then, one morning, the phone rang. Lena picked it up quickly, knowing instinctively that this was the call she had been waiting for. "It's done." Lucas's voice came through the receiver, low and urgent. "We've got him. Grayson's hiding in plain sight, but we've got everything we need to bring him down. It's over." Lena's heart raced as the words sank in. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We've got proof, irrefutable proof of everything he's been doing. We've got him." Lena stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had done it. Grayson's empire was about to fall. She had fought for this moment. She had risked everything for it. "Where do we go from here?" Lena asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. "We take it to the authorities," Lucas replied. "I'll set it up, but you need to be ready. This isn't just about Grayson anymore. We're going after the whole network." Lena nodded. "I'm ready." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The evidence they had gathered was overwhelming. Proof of Grayson's illegal activities, his manipulation, the countless people he had ruined. With everything in place, they made their move. The authorities, the press, and the public were all about to learn the truth. Grayson wouldn't be able to hide anymore. But Lena knew it wasn't going to be easy. Grayson wouldn't go down without a fight. There were still people in his corner, people who would do whatever it took to protect him. But they were out of time. The truth was out, and there was no way to stop it. As Lena stood in front of the courthouse, watching the news coverage of Grayson's arrest and the fallout from the scandal, she felt a strange sense of peace. The battle was over. The fight for justice had been won. Grayson's empire had crumbled, and the people he had harmed were finally getting the justice they deserved. But it wasn't just about Grayson. It wasn't just about the case. It was about something bigger. It was about the truth. It was about standing up, even when the odds were stacked against you. It was about fighting for what was right, no matter the cost. Lena turned to look at Ava, who stood beside her, a look of relief and pride on her face. "We did it," Lena said softly. Ava smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "You did it. You brought him down. And I'm proud of you." Lena's heart swelled with gratitude. She had done it, for Ava, for everyone who had been wronged, for justice. She had fought with everything she had, and now she could finally breathe. "Thank you," Lena whispered, her voice full of sincerity, "for believing in me." Ava placed a hand on her shoulder. "I always believed in you. You're a fighter, Lena. You always have been." Lena looked out at the bustling courthouse steps, the noise of the press and the crowds fading into the background. She had won, but more than that, she had found her purpose. She had found her voice, and she had learned that no matter how impossible the fight seemed, there was always a way to win. If you were willing to stand up and face the truth, no matter the consequences. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city, and as Lena stood there with Ava by her side, she knew that this was just the beginning. There were still battles to fight, still wrongs to right, but for the first time, Lena felt ready for whatever came next. She had learned the hard way that the fight for justice never ends. But she also knew that with courage, conviction, and the support of the people who believed in her, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as she walked away from the courthouse, Lena smiled to herself, knowing one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of her journey.